Imagine waking up and finding your entire village gone overnight. One morning, a boy woke up, and every single person had vanished. The houses were still there, the food was still there, but the people were gone. An entire village disappeared without a trace, and nobody knows where they went.
Welcome to Africa Uncovered, the place where we uncover Africa's greatest mysteries, forgotten histories, lost civilizations, and true stories so unbelievable they sound like fiction. Before we begin, make sure you like this video, subscribe to Africa Uncovered, and turn on the bell icon, because the mystery you're about to hear may be one of the strangest stories ever told. Now imagine this. You wake up early in the morning, the sun is rising, birds are singing. The day seems completely normal. You walk outside your house, stretch your arms, look around your village, and then you realize something is wrong, very wrong. The streets are empty, no children running, no farmers working, no voices, no laughter, nothing. Every house stands exactly where it should. Every door is open, every cooking pot remains untouched, every tool remains where it was left. But the people are gone. Not one, not two, not 10. Everyone gone. Imagine standing there, completely alone, in a village that was full of life only hours earlier. What would you do? Would you stay or would you run? Because according to one of Africa's most chilling legends, something very similar may have happened. A mystery that has survived for generations. A mystery that still leaves people asking the same terrifying question. Where did they go? And that's exactly what we're trying to uncover today. Our story begins many years ago in a remote African village, far from major cities, far from highways, far from the modern world. Life there was simple. Families farmed together, children played together, neighbors knew each other. Nothing extraordinary, just ordinary people living ordinary lives. Yet nobody could have imagined what would happen next, because the night before the disappearance, everything seemed perfectly normal. Villagers gathered around evening fires, shared meals, told stories, laughed with friends. Just another night. Nothing unusual, nothing suspicious, nothing alarming. If someone had told them what would happen by sunrise, nobody would have believed it. As darkness covered the village, families returned to their homes. One by one, the lights disappeared. The village fell asleep and silence took over. Hours passed. The moon crossed the sky. The night continued. Then morning arrived, and that's when the nightmare began. According to the legend, the first person to notice something strange was a young boy. He woke up before sunrise, as he often did. At first, nothing seemed unusual, but when he stepped outside, he noticed something strange. No smoke. Normally, dozens of cooking fires would already be burning, but not today. The village looked frozen, silent, still. The boy walked farther, then farther, and suddenly fear began growing inside him. Because every house he checked was empty, every single one. Beds abandoned, doors open, belongings untouched, yet no people, not a single person. Imagine that moment, walking through a place you've known your entire life and finding nobody. No explanation, no warning. No sign of struggle, only emptiness. The boy began running, calling names, searching, shouting, but nobody answered. The village had become a ghost town overnight, or so the legend says. And this is where things become even stranger, because when nearby villages heard the story, some people believed it immediately. Why? Because they claimed this wasn't the first time. There were older stories, older warnings, older legends. Stories about places where entire communities vanished without explanation, without evidence, without a trace. At first, most people dismissed these stories. But then strange details started emerging. Details that made the mystery even darker. Because according to witnesses, some things were left behind. Things that should never have been left behind. And what investigators found inside the abandoned houses would make the mystery even more disturbing. If you woke up tomorrow and discovered your entire town was empty, what would be the first thing you do? Search for answers or leave immediately? Comment below. I want to know. Because in the next chapter, we'll enter the abandoned village ourselves and discover the chilling clues that were allegedly left behind. The story spread quickly. At first, most people didn't believe it. How could an entire village disappear? One person, maybe. A family, possibly. But everyone? That seemed impossible. Yet curiosity is powerful, and within days, people from neighboring villages arrived. Some came to help. Some came to investigate. Others came simply because they couldn't believe the story. As they approached the village, an uneasy feeling settled over them. Something felt wrong. Not dangerous, not threatening, just wrong. The silence was the first thing they noticed. Villages are noisy places. Children laugh, animals move around, people talk. But here, nothing. Only the wind and the sound of footsteps. The visitors slowly entered. What they found shocked them. The houses were still standing. Nothing had been destroyed. Nothing had been burned. Nothing had been stolen. Every home looked as if its owners had simply stepped outside and never returned. Cooking pots still sat over old fire pits. Water containers remained full. Tools rested where they had been left. Clothing hung inside homes. Personal belongings remained untouched. Everything suggested the villagers had expected to return. Yet they never did. One visitor entered a small hut. The bed was still made. A meal sat unfinished. A wooden cup remained beside the table. Dust had not yet settled, which meant one thing. Whatever happened, it happened quickly. Very quickly. As more homes were inspected, the same pattern appeared again and again. No signs of violence, no signs of panic, no signs of struggle. Nothing. It was as though the entire village had vanished between one breath and the next. Then, someone noticed something strange. Footprints. Lots of them. At first, this seemed like good news. Footprints meant clues. Clues meant answers. Or so everyone hoped. But the tracks created a new mystery, because many footprints seemed to lead away from the village, yet they didn't all go in the same direction. Some headed north, others south. Others disappeared among rocky ground where tracking became impossible. It was almost as if people had left separately, not together, which made even less sense. Why would an entire village leave during the night without warning and in different directions? Nobody had an answer. As investigators searched further, rumors began spreading. Some claimed strange lights had been seen during the night. Others claimed they had heard distant sounds. A few even spoke about mysterious visitors arriving shortly before the disappearance. But nobody could prove any of it. The problem with mysteries is simple. The longer they survive, the harder it becomes to separate fact from legend. Every year adds new details. Every storyteller adds new twists. And eventually, nobody knows which parts are true. Yet, one detail appeared again and again. A warning. According to local stories, some elders had spoken of a danger long before the disappearance. A danger nobody took seriously at first. The warning was simple. If the drums stop, leave immediately. Nobody knew exactly what it meant, and that's what made it frightening. Because the drums had always been part of village life. Ceremonies, celebrations, gatherings. The sound of drums connected the community. But according to the legend, there came a night when the drums suddenly stopped. Completely, and they never played again. Coincidence? Perhaps. Or perhaps not. The mystery only grew deeper. Months passed, then years. Still no answers. The missing villagers were never found. No one returned. No message arrived. No explanation emerged. And slowly, the abandoned village became something else. A legend. Travelers visited it. Storytellers spoke about it. Children grew up hearing warnings about it. And the mystery refused to die. Because deep down, everyone wanted to know the same thing. What happened that night? And more importantly, could it happen again? The search for answers continued. But what investigators discovered next would completely change the story. Because hidden beyond the village, there was evidence that suggested the people may not have vanished at all. They may have gone somewhere, a place nobody expected. And if that theory was true, then the mystery was far from over. If you're enjoying this documentary, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to Africa Uncovered, and turn on the bell icon. Because the next chapter takes us beyond the abandoned village and into a discovery that could change everything. Years passed. The abandoned village remained untouched. The huts slowly aged. Grass grew taller. Nature began reclaiming what humans had left behind. Yet the mystery never disappeared. Because every few years, someone would return. Another researcher, another explorer, another curious traveler determined to solve the puzzle. Most left with more questions than answers. Then one day, something changed. A team exploring the area made a discovery hidden beyond the village itself. A trail, not a road, not a path marked on maps. A trail, faint, ancient, almost erased by time. At first, it seemed unimportant, but as researchers examined it more closely, they realized something strange. The trail appeared heavily used years ago. Very heavily used. Imagine hundreds of people walking the same route, day after day, month after month, eventually creating a visible mark across the landscape. That's exactly what the researchers found. And the direction of the trail shocked them, because it led away from the village, deep into the wilderness, toward a region few people visited, a region surrounded by old stories and older fears. Naturally, the researchers decided to follow it. The journey took hours, then days. The farther they traveled, the more isolated everything became. Dense vegetation surrounded them. Ancient trees blocked sunlight. The air felt heavier, almost untouched by modern civilization. Then they found something unexpected. Ruins. Not large ruins, not a lost city. Something much smaller. The remains of temporary shelters, old fire pits, broken tools, pieces of pottery. Signs that people had once stayed there. Lots of people. Suddenly, a new theory emerged. What if the villagers hadn't vanished? What if they had left voluntarily? The idea sounded reasonable. Maybe drought forced them away. Maybe conflict threatened the village. Maybe disease spread through the community. History is full of villages abandoned for practical reasons. Perhaps this was simply another example. For a moment, the mystery seemed close to being solved. But then researchers noticed something strange. The temporary camp wasn't large enough, not even close. A few dozen people, perhaps, but not an entire village, and certainly not enough to explain where everyone went. The mystery remained. Yet the discovery changed everything, because for the first time, there was evidence that movement had occurred. The villagers had not simply disappeared into thin air. At least some of them had traveled. But why? And where had they gone afterward? Those questions remained unanswered. As researchers continued exploring, they discovered something even more fascinating. Old oral histories. Stories passed from generation to generation. Stories preserved long before modern records existed. According to some elders, the abandoned village may have received a warning. Not from enemies, not from invaders, from nature itself. A warning few people recognized until it was too late. Because strange things had reportedly begun happening before the disappearance. Animals behaving differently, birds leaving the area, water sources changing unexpectedly, and unusual sounds during the night. At first, Nobody paid attention. Why would they? Most unusual events have ordinary explanations, but sometimes small warnings become important only after disaster strikes. And that possibility terrified researchers. Because if the stories were true, then perhaps the villagers had seen something coming, something dangerous, something powerful enough to make an entire community leave. But what? A natural disaster? A hidden threat? Or something nobody had considered yet? The search for answers continued, and eventually researchers uncovered evidence pointing toward a shocking possibility, a possibility that could explain everything. Not perfectly, but better than any theory before it. And when they presented it, the mystery of the empty village suddenly looked very different. Because the next chapter isn't about legends, it's about survival, and the possibility that the villagers' disappearance may have been the smartest decision they ever made. If you noticed strange signs around your town, animals leaving, water changing, and people reporting unusual events, would you stay or would you leave immediately? Comment below. And if you're enjoying this mystery so far, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the bell icon for more incredible stories on Africa Uncovered. The deeper researchers dug into the mystery, the stranger the story became. Because according to local elders, the disappearance didn't happen without warning. The signs were there, small signs, easy to ignore, easy to dismiss. But looking back, they suddenly seemed important. Very important. One elder described it like this: the village was changing before anyone realized it. At first, nobody paid attention. Why would they? Life was normal. Families worked. Children played. The village remained busy. Yet nature seemed different. The birds were the first to go. For generations, large flocks nested around the village. Their songs filled the mornings. Then, one season, they began disappearing. Nobody thought much of it. Birds migrate. Birds move. It happens all the time. But then came the animals. Hunters reported seeing fewer tracks, fewer herds, fewer signs of wildlife. Even the insects seemed less active. One by one, the sounds of nature grew quieter. The villagers noticed, but nobody understood why. Then came the water. And that's when concern started spreading. The village depended on a nearby water source for drinking, cooking, farming, everything. For generations, the water had remained reliable. Then suddenly, it changed. Some claimed the taste became strange. Others claimed the water level began dropping unexpectedly. A few reported seeing unusual colors near the edges. Nobody agreed on exactly what happened, but everyone agreed on one thing. Something felt wrong. Still, most people stayed, because leaving a village isn't easy. It's home, it's family, it's history. People don't abandon everything because of rumors. Then, another strange event occurred. The drums stopped. For centuries, the village drums had been part of everyday life. Celebrations, gatherings, warnings. The sound connected everyone. Then, one evening, the drums suddenly fell silent. Not for a day, not for a week, forever. To outsiders, that might not sound important. But to the villagers, it felt unsettling. Almost like the heartbeat of the community had stopped. And according to the legend, fear began spreading after that. Quietly, slowly, like a shadow moving through the village. People started talking, whispering, wondering if something bad was coming. Then came the night nobody forgot, a night that appears again and again in local stories. The sky looked strange. Some described unusual lights on the horizon. Others spoke about distant sounds. A few claimed animals became restless. Dogs barked. Livestock refused to settle. Even people who normally slept peacefully reported feeling uneasy, as if something was about to happen. Nobody knew what, only that something felt different, very different. And then morning came. The village was empty.
Gone, just like that. No warning, no explanation, no answers. For years, people believed the mystery would never be solved, but modern researchers eventually proposed a shocking theory. A theory based not on legends, not on spirits, not on curses, but on survival. What if the villagers had seen signs of danger, real danger? A danger invisible to outsiders, something powerful enough to force an entire community to leave during the night. Because Africa's history contains many examples of villages relocating suddenly, droughts, floods, disease, conflict, environmental change, sometimes entire communities move to survive. And if that's what happened here, then the disappearance wasn't a mystery at all. It was a desperate escape. But there was one problem, a very big problem. If the villagers escaped, where did they go? Because despite decades of searching, no confirmed settlement linked to the missing village was ever found. No records, no documents, no final destination. Nothing. Which meant the biggest question still remained unanswered. The people were gone, but their final journey remained hidden. And in the next chapter, researchers uncover the most convincing theory yet, a theory that may finally explain why an entire village vanished overnight and why nobody ever returned. If you're enjoying this documentary, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to Africa Uncovered, and turn on the bell icon, because the next chapter may contain the closest thing we've ever had to an answer. For decades, people focused on the mystery, the disappearance, the empty homes, the unanswered questions. But eventually, a few researchers began looking at the story differently. Instead of asking, what happened after the villagers vanished, they asked, what happened before they vanished? And surprisingly, that simple question changed everything. Because the more evidence they studied, the more they began believing something important. The villagers may not have disappeared. They may have escaped. Escaped from something they understood, but outsiders did not. At first, the idea sounded ordinary. Perhaps there was a drought. Perhaps the water source was failing. Perhaps crops were dying. Perhaps survival became impossible. After all, history is full of communities forced to relocate. Yet researchers soon discovered something interesting. Several nearby regions had experienced environmental changes around the same period, changes capable of threatening entire settlements. Rivers shifted, rainfall patterns changed, water sources became unreliable. Land that once supported communities became difficult to live on. For small villages, such changes could be devastating. Imagine spending generations building a home, then watching the environment slowly turn against you. Your crops fail, your animals weaken, your water becomes scarce. Every month becomes harder than the last. Eventually, you face a terrible choice. Stay and risk everything, or leave and start over somewhere else. Researchers began wondering if that exact decision had been made here. Suddenly, many details started making sense. The untouched belongings, the lack of violence, the absence of destruction, the organized appearance of the village. These weren't signs of panic. They were signs of preparation, signs that people left intentionally. And if that theory was true, then the village didn't vanish overnight. The decision may have been developing for months, perhaps even years. But then, researchers encountered a problem, a major problem. Because even if the villagers left voluntarily, one mystery remained unsolved. Nobody knew where they went, and that question haunted every investigation. The trail discovered beyond the village suggested movement. The temporary camp suggested travel, yet the final destination remained hidden.
It was as if the villagers disappeared during the journey itself. And that's when another theory emerged, a darker theory, a theory connected to something that has shaped human history for thousands of years: migration. Because moving an entire community is incredibly dangerous, especially in remote regions. People become separated, supplies run low, weather changes unexpectedly, illness spreads, accidents happen. What begins as a journey toward survival can quickly become a struggle for survival. Researchers wondered, what if the village successfully left but never reached its intended destination? What if the disappearance wasn't one event, but a long chain of events, a difficult journey slowly lost to history? The idea was heartbreaking, because it transformed the mystery. No longer a story about people vanishing, but a story about people fighting to survive. Families, children, parents, grandparents, all searching for a better future. And somewhere along the way, their story was forgotten. Yet, despite how convincing this theory sounded, there was still one final obstacle: evidence, hard evidence. Researchers had theories, possibilities, explanations, but no proof. And without proof, the legend survived. Because legends live in the spaces where certainty ends. The villagers remained missing, the destination remained unknown, the mystery remained alive. Then, just when it seemed the story would never move forward, researchers uncovered something unexpected.
A collection of oral histories, stories passed down through generations. Stories that may contain the final piece of the puzzle. And if those stories are accurate, then the villagers may have reached somewhere remarkable. A place hidden far beyond the abandoned village. A place almost forgotten by history itself. And in the next chapter, we'll follow those stories, because they may lead us closer to the truth than ever before. If your village became impossible to live in, would you leave everything behind and start over somewhere new? Or would you stay and fight for your home? Let me know in the comments. And if you're enjoying this documentary, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the bell icon, because the next chapter may reveal the most important clue in the entire mystery. For years, the abandoned village remained a mystery. No bodies, no records, no confirmed destination, just questions, endless questions. Then researchers discovered something unexpected. Not a map, not a document, a story. An old story, one passed down through generations. A story so old, nobody knew exactly when it began. Yet strangely, different elders from different regions told almost the same version. And that caught researchers' attention. Because when stories survive for generations, there is often a reason. Hidden somewhere inside the legend, a piece of truth may still remain. According to the story, the villagers did not disappear. They traveled. Far beyond the known paths. Far beyond the places outsiders visited. Toward a hidden valley. A valley protected by mountains. A place difficult to find. A place few people knew existed. At first, researchers dismissed the tale. It sounded too convenient, too perfect, almost like a fairy tale. But then something strange happened. Several independent oral histories mentioned the same destination. Not the exact same details, but the same idea. A hidden place. A place of water. A place of safety. A place where people went when survival depended on it. Suddenly, the legend became harder to ignore. What if the villagers really had relocated? What if they had intentionally chosen a place outsiders couldn't easily find? After all, history contains many examples of communities doing exactly that, especially during times of danger. The more researchers investigated, the more possible it seemed. Then another clue emerged. An elder described a route. Not a complete route, just fragments, pieces of memory passed from one generation to another. A river, a rocky ridge, a giant baobab tree, a narrow mountain pass. Individually, the clues meant little. Together, they formed a possible path. And for the first time, researchers had something concrete to follow. Excitement spread quickly. Could this finally be the breakthrough? Could they be close to solving a mystery that had survived for generations?
An expedition was organized, maps were prepared, equipment checked, routes planned, and the search began. The journey was difficult, very difficult. Dense forests, rough terrain, remote landscapes. Days turned into weeks, yet the team continued, because every step brought them closer to the possibility of an answer. Then something appeared. Evidence, real evidence, not proof, but evidence. Old stone foundations, fragments of pottery, signs of human activity, ancient signs. Enough to suggest that people had once lived there, many people. The discovery electrified researchers. For the first time, the legend seemed connected to a real location. But excitement quickly turned into frustration, because the evidence raised new questions. The settlement was old, very old, older than expected. And there was no way to prove the missing villagers had ever lived there. The connection remained uncertain. Once again, the mystery refused to provide a clear answer. Still, researchers learned something important. The story wasn't impossible. The villagers could have relocated, they could have survived, they could have built new lives elsewhere. The theory was realistic, yet certainty remained out of reach. And that's when researchers finally realized something. Maybe they had been asking the wrong question all along. Maybe the goal wasn't to solve every detail. Maybe the goal was to understand why the story survived. Because even if the exact truth is lost, the reason people remembered the story might reveal something even more important. A lesson, a warning, a memory preserved through generations. And in the next chapter, we'll uncover the emotional heart of the mystery. Because the story of the empty village may not be about disappearance at all. It may be about survival. It may be about sacrifice. And it may explain why people refuse to let the legend die. If you're enjoying this documentary, like the video, subscribe to Africa Uncovered and turn on the bell icon, because we're getting very close to the truth. By now, the mystery had lasted for generations. Researchers had followed trails, studied ruins, collected stories, analyzed every clue they could find. Yet one question remained. Why? Why had this story survived for so long? Think about it. Thousands of villages have existed throughout history. Thousands have been abandoned. Thousands have disappeared from maps. Yet most are forgotten. So why did people continue telling this particular story? The answer may be simpler than you think. Because the story wasn't just about a village. It was about people. Real people. Families. Parents. Children. Grandparents. People forced to make impossible choices. And those are the stories that survive, the stories that touch something deep inside us. Imagine being a village elder. You begin noticing signs of danger. The water changes. Animals disappear. The environment becomes unpredictable. Every day, the threat grows larger, but nobody knows exactly what's coming. Now imagine facing a decision: stay or leave. Neither choice feels safe. Neither choice guarantees survival. Yet, you must choose. Not for yourself, for everyone, for the entire community. That burden would be enormous, and perhaps that's what people remembered. Not the disappearance, the decision, the courage required to act before it was too late. Because throughout history, many communities survived only because someone recognized danger early. Someone listened to the warnings. Someone made the difficult choice. And perhaps the empty village became a symbol of that lesson, a reminder, a warning, a story passed down to future generations. The message was simple. Pay attention. Listen to the signs around you. Don't ignore warnings simply because they seem small. Because sometimes, the smallest warnings become the biggest disasters. And that's where the mystery becomes surprisingly emotional, because whether the villagers disappeared or relocated or started new lives elsewhere, the truth may never be fully known. But one thing is certain: their story survived. Long after their homes disappeared,
long after their names were forgotten, long after the village itself faded into history, the story remained. And perhaps that's its greatest mystery, not where the people went, but how their memory refused to vanish. Because legends are powerful, they preserve what history often forgets. And in this case, the legend preserved an entire community, a community that otherwise might have disappeared forever. Yet one final chapter remains, because before we end this journey, we must return to the abandoned village one last time. Back to the empty houses, back to the silent streets, back to the place where the mystery began. And there, we'll ask the question that still fascinates people today. What really happened that night? And why does the story continue capturing imaginations all these years later? If you're enjoying this documentary, like the video, subscribe to Africa Uncovered and turn on the bell icon. Because the final chapter is next, and we're about to bring this incredible mystery to a powerful conclusion. We began this journey with a question that has survived for generations, a question nobody has ever fully answered. How can an entire village disappear overnight? Now, after following every clue, every story, every theory, we're finally back where it all began. The village. Silent. Empty. Forgotten. Or perhaps not forgotten at all. Imagine standing there one final time, the wind moving through abandoned huts, grass growing where children once played, doors hanging open, the remains of a community frozen in time. At first glance, it looks like a mystery, a place where people vanished. But after everything we've learned, the truth may be something different. Because the strongest explanation isn't supernatural. It isn't a curse. It isn't an unexplained force. It's something far more human. Survival. Researchers now believe the villagers likely recognized danger long before outsiders understood it. Perhaps the environment was changing. Perhaps resources were becoming scarce. Perhaps they saw signs nobody else noticed. And when the time came, they made a decision. A painful decision. To leave. To abandon homes built by generations. To leave behind memories. To leave behind comfort. To leave behind certainty. And step into the unknown. Imagine that moment. The final night. Families quietly preparing. Gathering supplies. Saying goodbye to the only home they had ever known. Parents trying to remain strong. Children asking questions nobody could fully answer. Where are we going? Will we come back? What happens next? The adults probably didn't know either. They simply knew they had to move, because staying was no longer an option. And perhaps that's the real reason the village was found empty. Not because something took the people, but because the people chose hope over fear. They chose possibility over certainty. They chose survival over comfort. And somewhere beyond the horizon, they continued their story, a story history failed to record. Yet, even if that explanation is correct, the mystery still remains powerful. Because no documents survived, no names survived, no detailed records survived. Only a legend, a memory, a question. And maybe that's enough. Because some stories don't survive because of facts. They survive because of what they mean. The empty village reminds us that every abandoned place once mattered. Every ruined house once held laughter. Every forgotten path once led somewhere important. Every lost community once had dreams. And behind every mystery, there were real people. People whose stories deserve to be remembered. Perhaps that's why this legend continues to fascinate us. Not because it's scary, not because it's impossible, but because it's human, deeply human. The fear of losing home, the fear of uncertainty, the fear of the future. And at the same time, the courage to keep moving forward. That courage may be the true secret hidden inside the mystery. Not disappearance, survival. Not fear, hope. And maybe, just maybe, the villagers never truly vanished at all.
Because as long as people continue telling their story, a part of them remains alive. Generation after generation, year after year, long after the village itself disappeared. So what really happened that night? The honest answer is this: we don't know, and perhaps we never will. But sometimes the search for answers teaches us more than the answers themselves. And this mystery is a perfect example. A forgotten village, a vanished community, a legend that refused to die, and a story that continues to make people wonder. What would I have done? Would I have stayed, or would I have left with everyone else? Into the darkness, hoping for a better future. That's a question only you can answer. Final question for the audience. If you had been living in that village and strange signs kept appearing around you, would you have left everything behind, or would you have stayed until the very end? Tell us in the comments below. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this documentary, please like the video, subscribe to Africa Uncovered, and turn on the bell icon. Because here on Africa Uncovered, we explore Africa's greatest mysteries, lost civilizations, forgotten kingdoms, ancient legends, and true stories that history almost erased. Final closing. Some villages disappear. Some histories are forgotten, but some mysteries refuse to fade away. And somewhere out there, the story of the empty village still lives on. The end. Africa Uncovered. Uncovering the mysteries history left behind.